How do you react when your own daughter looks you in the eye and introduces you as maintenance staff in the house you bought for her? How do you stay calm when she says her real family paid for everything while you stand there holding the original keys? This is what happened the day I found my daughter working as a maid in the $4 million house that still had my name on the papers. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Alan Reyes. I am 61 years old. I build things for a living. I have done it most of my life. I used to think that if you work hard and keep your word, people will respect you. I also used to think that your own child will always know who you are. I live in a small apartment now. It is clean, it is quiet, the kind of quiet that feels safe but also feels empty. I have one shelf with photos, Clara as a baby in my arms, Clara on her first day of school, Clara holding a cheap trophy from a school event. I kept those pictures because they remind me why I worked so much. They remind me why I gave so much away. That morning, I stood there with a mug of coffee, looking at those photos like they were proof that I did not imagine my own life. For weeks, I had been trying to see my daughter. Not for a big talk, not to ask for anything, just to see her. Just to stand in that house I bought and feel that I did not waste my years. Each time I asked, the answer came back soft and polite. She said she was busy. She said there were events. She said there were people coming in and out. She said we could talk soon. The words were always gentle, but the doors stayed closed. That morning, I decided I would stop waiting for permission. I told myself I was her father. I told myself I had done nothing wrong. I put on a plain shirt and a jacket. I did not wear anything fancy. I do not own fancy clothes. I picked up a small leather folder and the original keys I still had. I used to carry those keys with pride. That day, they felt heavy in my pocket, like a stone. The drive to the gated community took almost an hour. The closer I got, the more the streets changed. Fewer cracks in the road, more clean sidewalks, trees placed like someone planned them on paper. When I reached the gate, I slowed down and rolled the window down. A guard stepped out of a booth and looked at me like he was trying to place me in a file in his head. He asked who I was visiting. I told him I was going to Clara's house. I said her name, and I gave the address. He asked for my identification. I gave it to him. He looked at it, then looked back at me. He asked if I had an appointment. I told him I did not, but I was family. He said he could not let me in without a call or a note on the list. I watched cars behind me, clean and quiet, waiting. I felt my face grow warm, but I kept my voice steady. I told him that I owned the place, but I did not push it. I did not want a scene at a gate. The guard said he would call the house. He spoke into a radio. Then he asked me to pull over to the side. He said he did not want to block traffic. I sat there for several minutes with my hands on the wheel. I could see the top of the roofline behind the trees, a place I had pictured for years, a place I had promised my daughter, a place that now needed someone's permission to let me near it. The guard came back and said the house was busy. He said he was told to let me in for a short visit, but I had to go straight to the service entrance. He said that was the instruction. The words hit me in a small, quiet way. Service entrance, like I was a delivery man, like I was there to fix a pipe. I nodded and said I understood. The gate opened. I drove in slowly, trying to keep my breathing even. I told myself it did not matter which door I used. I told myself I was there to see my daughter, not to prove anything to a guard. The driveway was long and smooth. The house was bright, all glass and stone with sharp lines and large windows. It looked like something from a magazine. There were cars parked near the front and more cars arriving. I could see staff moving through the front hall. I did not go to the front steps. I followed the signs toward the side. I parked near a small path that led to a door by the kitchen. A young man opened it before I even knocked. He wore a headset and held a clipboard. He looked me up and down and asked what I was there for. I said I was here to see Clara. He asked if I was the new handyman. I told him no. I told him I was her father. He blinked once, then said he would check. He stepped away, still holding the clipboard like a shield. Inside, everything smelled like lemon and polished wood. The kitchen was bigger than my whole apartment. Counters were spotless. Silver trays sat in neat rows. A few staff members moved fast, quiet, and focused. No one looked at me for more than a second. I stood near the doorway, feeling like I was in the wrong place, even though I knew I was not. Then I saw Clara. She was wiping down the counter. She wore a plain uniform, simple and neat. Her hair was pulled back tight. She moved carefully, like she was trying not to make mistakes. For a moment, I did not understand what I was seeing. My mind tried to correct it, like it was a mistake in a photo. This was my daughter. In the house I bought for her. standing like staff, listening for instructions. A woman's voice cut through the room, Vivian's voice, smooth and firm. She was talking about timing, about plates, about where people would stand for photos. A party planner nodded and wrote notes. Clara answered in short sentences. She said she would handle it. She said it would be ready. She did not speak like the owner of the home. She spoke like someone who could be replaced if she moved too slow. I stepped forward and said her name softly. I said, Clara. She turned. Her eyes met mine. For a second, I saw a flicker of something. Surprise? Fear? Maybe shame? Then her face changed into a polite mask, the kind you wear when you want to avoid trouble. Before she could speak, Vivian looked over. Vivian's eyes moved over me and then away, like I was a chair in the corner. She asked who I was and why I was in the kitchen area. The party planner also looked at me, confused. I said I was Alan. I said I was Clara's father. I said I came to see my daughter. I kept my tone calm. I expected Clara to step forward and say, "Yes, this is my father." I expected her to smile, even if it was tense. Instead, Clara took a small step back. She looked at Vivian first. Then she looked back at me. Her voice stayed light, like she was explaining a simple detail. She told them I was someone who used to help around in the past. She said I was connected to her mother's side. She said I sometimes stopped by and got confused about the schedule. The words did not land like a slap. They landed like cold water. I stood there and felt my body go still. It was not just that she did not defend me. It was that she spoke like she was careful to use the safest story for the room. A story where I was not important. A story where she did not have to claim me. A couple of early guests walked in through the hall, looking for the restroom. They glanced into the kitchen and saw me standing there. One of them smiled politely. Vivian smiled back, like nothing was strange. Clara's hands kept moving. Wipe, fold, wipe. Her eyes did not return to my face. I asked Clara if we could talk alone for a minute. I said I just wanted to check on her. She said it was not a good time. She said the house was full of staff and guests. She said we could talk later. She said she would call me. Then Brandon arrived. He came in through the side hall, dressed in a nice suit, hair perfect, phone in hand. He looked at me with a quick scan and a tight smile. He greeted Vivian with warmth. He greeted the party planner with confidence. When he spoke to Clara, his tone was controlled and bright, like he was giving directions. Then he turned to me and said we should step aside. He led me a few steps away, near the pantry. He lowered his voice and spoke like he was doing me a kindness. He said he understood I meant well. He said drop-in visits made things hard. He said Clara was under stress and needed stability. He said the right way to do this was to go through their assistant and schedule time. I told him I understood. I kept my voice even. I did not argue in that room. I did not want to be the loud man in the kitchen. I asked him one simple question. I asked why Clara was dressed like staff in her own home. Brandon's smile stayed in place, but his eyes changed. He said the word teamwork. He said they were hosting important people. He said everyone had to do their part. He said Clara wanted to show she was humble. I looked past him at my daughter. She did not look humble. She looked trapped. I left the way I came. I did not make a speech. I did not raise my voice. I walked back to my car on the side path, hearing the soft sound of music starting inside. When I reached the driveway, I saw a new group of guests arriving, dressed in bright clothes, laughing like the world was easy. At the gate, the guard waved me through without a word. It was as if my short visit had been checked off like a delivery. I drove away with both hands on the wheel. I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not even feel anger yet. I felt something simpler and worse. I felt like I had been removed from my own family while still alive and standing. When I got back to my apartment, I sat at my small kitchen table. I took the keys out of my pocket and set them down. I placed the leather folder beside them. I did not open it. I just looked at it for a long time. I told myself that begging for a place in my daughter's life was not love. I told myself that being quiet did not mean being powerless. I also told myself that if people wanted to treat me like I did not exist, then I would stop trying to prove that I did. I picked up my phone. My hands were steady. I scrolled to one number I had not called in a long time. I did not think about what I would say after hello. I only knew I needed to speak to someone who understood paper, rules, and truth. I pressed call. I did not call Rena that night because I wanted to punish anyone. I called because I needed to understand what was happening. I had spent years telling myself that if I stayed calm and kept giving, things would balance out. But when Clara looked through me in her own kitchen, I felt something shift. It was not anger. It was certainty. While the phone rang, I looked around my apartment. It was small but organized. Every object had a place. I lived like that on purpose. When you spend decades on job sites, you learn that chaos costs money. It also costs peace. Rena answered, and I told her I needed to see her soon. I told her it was about the house and about Clara. I did not give her every detail on the phone. I just said I was ready to talk properly. She said she had time the next day. She said I should bring anything I still had from the original purchase. After the call, I sat alone and tried to find the exact moment things changed between me and my daughter. People like to pretend these shifts happen overnight. They do not. They happen slowly. They happen in polite conversations. They happen through invitations that stop coming. They happen through little corrections in language. They happen until one day your own child introduces you like a stranger. Clara grew up in a small townhouse on the west side. It was nothing special. But it was ours. I bought it when I was younger, back when my hands were always rough and my knees did not ache. I worked as a contractor then. Long days, short nights. I did whatever jobs came in. Renovations, repairs, small builds. I did not have a large team. I had a few steady workers and a lot of stubborn pride. Her mother and I did not last. Elaine liked the idea of stability, but she did not like the reality of how it looked. She wanted dinners out and travel and new furniture. I wanted a paid mortgage and a full fridge and a quiet home. We argued about money like it was a personal insult. When Clara was still small, Elaine left. She said she needed a different life. She said she loved Clara, but she could not live the way I lived. After that, I raised Clara on my own most of the time. Elaine came and went. Sometimes she showed up with gifts and big promises. Sometimes months passed with nothing. I learned to stop expecting consistency from her. I focused on what I could control. Clara and I had routines. I packed her lunches. I went to school meetings. I sat through performances in folding chairs while my phone buzzed with work calls. I learned to be two people at once, a father and a provider. When Clara got older, she would sit at the kitchen table while I did paperwork. She would ask what the numbers meant, and I would explain in simple words. I told her that every number had a story. A payment meant someone trusted you. A receipt meant you kept your word. I promised her a better life, but I was careful with my promise. I never told her she would become someone else. I told her she would have choices. As my business grew, my role changed. I stopped working with my hands every day and started working with plans, schedules, permits, and clients. I was still not flashy. I did not buy fancy cars. I kept my tools. I kept my old boots. I reinvested everything. The year Clara finished college was the year I finally felt like I could breathe. I had just finished a big commercial renovation. It was the kind of project that makes your name stronger in the local industry. I had a good team and steady work lined up. I still remember the day I sat in my site office with a stack of papers and realized I could do something meaningful for Clara without risking my entire future. That was when the idea of the house started to form. Not a small starter home, not a townhouse like mine, a real dream home. The kind Clara used to point at in magazines when she was younger, half joking, half wishing. I did not tell her right away. I wanted it to be secure. I wanted it to last. That is why I asked Rena for advice. Rena and I met years earlier through a business dispute. She was calm, practical, and focused on facts. I liked that. Over time, she handled my contracts and watched my company grow. When I told her I wanted to buy Clara a home, she did not smile and congratulate me like others did. She asked what I wanted that home to represent. I said I wanted it to be a foundation, not a leash. I said I wanted Clara to feel safe. Rena said safety comes from structure. She explained that a large gift can become messy if relationships change. She suggested a trust structure and clear conditions. She said it would protect Clara, and it would also protect me from being pushed out of my own decision. At the time, I thought that sounded cold. I told her Clara would never treat me like that. Rena did not argue. She just said people change when money and status get involved. I wish I had listened harder, or maybe I listened just enough, because I did follow her advice. I signed what I needed to sign and filed what I needed to file. I did it in a clean, professional way. Then I bought the house. When Clara first saw it, she cried. She hugged me hard. She said she did not know how to thank me. She said she would never forget what I did. I believed her, not because I needed praise, but because I saw the emotion in her face. That day, she was still my daughter in the way I understood the word. She was still the person who knew where she came from. Brandon came later. Clara met Brandon at a professional event. She told me he was smart and ambitious. She said he had big goals. She said he came from a different world, but he respected her. When she introduced us, he was polite. He shook my hand firmly. He called me sir. He asked about my work with the kind of curiosity that sounded rehearsed. I answered calmly. I did not try to impress him. I had built my life without needing his approval. But I noticed things. Brandon did not like the townhouse. He did not say it directly. He did not have to. His eyes moved around the room like he was measuring it against a standard. He spoke about restaurants and travel. He spoke about networks and visibility. He said those words like they were tools you use to build a life. He asked Clara about her future in a way that sounded like a plan, not a dream. Vivian came with him at the engagement dinner. That night was the first time I felt my place in Clara's story start to shrink. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place with low lighting and quiet music. A host led us to a table in the center of the room. Vivian arrived wearing a calm smile and expensive perfume. She greeted Clara warmly. She greeted Brandon like he was the main character. When she greeted me, her eyes were friendly, but her attention was thin. She spoke to me like you speak to someone you do not plan to remember. During dinner, Vivian spoke about family history and tradition. She talked about their community, their events, their connections. She spoke as if the future was already decided. She thanked Brandon for supporting Clara and giving her opportunities. She thanked Elaine, who was also there, for raising such a wonderful daughter. Then Vivian spoke about the house. She said the King family was excited to help Clara settle into a proper home. She said the house represented a new chapter and a new standard. She said it was wonderful that Clara would not have to worry about the limitations of her past. The way she said it made it sound like the home came from their side. I felt my jaw tighten. I opened my mouth to correct the story. I was ready to say, calmly, that I bought the house and I set it up for Clara. I was not looking for applause. I was looking for truth. But Clara reached under the table and touched my arm. Later, she told me it was not worth making the evening uncomfortable. She said Vivian was just trying to be generous in how she spoke. She said it would make things easier if I let them have their moment. Easier for who? I wondered. But I stayed quiet. I told myself it was just one dinner. I told myself Clara knew the truth in her heart. After that, the small shifts became a pattern. Family events moved into their world. Invitations came through assistants. Times changed at the last minute. When I arrived, there was always someone new I had to introduce myself to. People smiled politely and asked what I did, and when I answered, their interest faded. Clara started dressing differently, speaking differently, not in a natural way, but in a careful way, like she was copying a tone. The house also changed. At first, Clara called it her home, then she called it our place, meaning her and Brandon. Then she called it the house, like it was a stage for their lifestyle. She stopped asking me for advice on repairs or upkeep. That should have been a good sign. It should have meant she felt confident, but it did not feel like confidence. It felt like distance. Elaine drifted closer to the Kings, too. She enjoyed the dinners and the trips and the attention. She started speaking as if we were all part of one polished family. She started using the same soft language Vivian used. When I tried to talk about practical things, Elaine would tell me not to be negative, so I stayed calm. I stayed quiet. I kept my tone even. I told myself that my job was to support Clara, not to compete for a seat at someone else's table. But support without respect turns into something else. It turns into being used as a background detail. It turns into being tolerated. It turns into being erased. That was why the kitchen moment hurt so much. It was not a single insult. It was the final shape of a story they had been writing for years. A story where Clara could live in the house I bought, serve guests in it, and still act like I was only a helper from the past. That night, I did not sleep much. I kept seeing Clara's face when she looked at Vivian first before she spoke. I kept hearing the careful way she described me. I kept feeling the weight of the keys in my pocket. By morning, I was tired, but my thoughts were clean. I knew one thing for sure. If people were going to treat my work like it came from someone else, then I would stop letting them use my silence as permission. I would handle it properly. I would do it the right way, through the systems they respected. 2 days after that visit, my body reminded me that calm is not the same as being untouched. It started in the late afternoon, right after I finished checking a job site. The air was cold, and I had been walking the perimeter with a clipboard, thinking about timelines and materials. I felt a pressure in my chest, not sharp, but heavy. I stopped and leaned against my truck for a moment, waiting for it to pass. It did not. It stayed. My breathing became shallow, and my hands felt a little numb. I told myself it was stress. I told myself I just needed water and a quiet room. I drove home slowly. I turned the radio off. I focused on the road and on steady breaths. By the time I reached my apartment, the pressure had not lifted. I sat on the edge of my couch and listened to the silence. I realized I did not want to be stubborn about this. I had been stubborn for most of my life. Stubbornness built my business. It also cost me sleep and peace. That day, I chose the practical move. I went to the hospital. The waiting room was bright and plain. A television played a daytime show with the sound low. A few people sat in chairs staring at their phones. A nurse called names with the same calm tone each time. I signed my name, answered questions, and waited. Hours passed in small blocks of time. Every time the doors opened, cold air moved through the room. I watched it like it mattered. I sent a short message to Clara. I told her I was at the hospital and I was fine, but I wanted her to know. I did not ask her to come. I did not want to sound dramatic. I just wanted to see if she would respond like a daughter. She replied late. The message was polite. She said she hoped I was okay. She said she was busy with planning and would check in later. There was no call, no follow-up question, no offer to stop by. Just a few clean words, like a reply to a distant acquaintance. Isla came. She is not my daughter, but she has known me since she was a child. Her parents worked with me years ago. I helped them during a hard time, and they never forgot it. Isla started helping me with bookkeeping when she was in school. Over the years, she became part of my daily life in a quiet way. She knows my routines, she knows when I skip meals, she knows when my voice changes. She walked into the waiting room holding a paper bag with food and a bottle of water. She sat beside me and spoke softly, asking how I was feeling. She did not make a speech. She just showed up. I told her I was fine and that the doctors were being careful. Isla looked at my face for a few seconds and said I needed to stop carrying everything alone. She said it like a simple truth, not an argument. Later that night, after tests and more waiting, a doctor told me it was likely stress and exhaustion. The doctor said I needed rest and follow-up appointments. I nodded and thanked him. I took the papers they gave me and folded them into my jacket pocket without reading every line. I was too tired. In the parking lot, Isla walked with me to my car. The wind was sharp, and the lights above the asphalt made everything look pale. Isla asked again if Clara knew I was there. I said yes. Isla paused, then asked if Clara was coming. I told her no. I said she was busy. Isla did not press, but her silence said enough. I went home and slept for a few hours. When I woke up, my phone had one new message from Elaine. She wrote that she heard I went to the hospital. She wrote that she hoped I was okay. She wrote that Clara and Brandon had a lot going on, and I should not take it personally. I read that message twice. It felt like someone putting a hand on your shoulder while also guiding you out the door. The next week, Clara invited me to meet her at the clubhouse inside the gated community. She said it would be quiet. She said she wanted to talk. She said she missed me. The words were soft enough to sound sincere, but I had learned to watch actions more than sentences. I arrived early. The clubhouse looked like a hotel lobby, clean chairs, polished floors, a small coffee bar. There were framed photos of the community on the walls, all bright skies and smiling faces. I sat at a small table near the window and waited. People walked past in gym clothes or swimwear, holding towels, laughing with a lightness that felt expensive. Clara came in 10 minutes late. She wore sunglasses on her head and carried a small bag. Her posture was tight, like she was bracing for something. She hugged me quickly, then sat down across from me. She asked how I was feeling. Her tone was careful. I told her I was okay and that I was following the doctor's advice. She nodded, then looked over my shoulder toward the pool area outside, as if she was checking who could see us. She said she wanted to talk about boundaries. She said their life was busy. She said there were events and people and expectations. She said it was hard to manage everything when I showed up without notice. She said I needed to understand that she and Brandon were building something and they had to protect their space. The words sounded like something she had practiced. They also sounded like they were not fully hers. I listened without interrupting. When she paused, I asked her one question. I asked why she introduced me in the kitchen the way she did. I kept my voice calm. I did not accuse. I did not raise my volume. I only asked for an explanation. Clara looked down at her hands. She said it was complicated. She said Vivian did not like surprises. She said it was not a good moment. She said she did not want people to judge her. She said, in a small voice, that the community watched everything. I asked her if she understood how it felt to hear my own daughter talk about me like I was a stranger. Clara's eyes flicked toward me, then away again. She said she did not mean it that way. She said she was trying to keep things smooth. She said I should not make everything about myself. That last sentence landed quietly, but it landed. At that moment, a group of neighbors entered the clubhouse. Clara's face changed. Her shoulders lifted slightly and her smile appeared. It was a social smile, easy and quick. She waved, they waved back. One of them, a woman around Clara's age, walked over and asked if Clara was coming to the pool later. Clara said yes. Maybe? The neighbor's eyes moved to me. She asked who I was. Clara did not answer right away. She hesitated for one breath, and I saw the decision happen in her face. Then she introduced me as an old family friend. She said I had known her for a long time, and I was visiting. The neighbor smiled politely and said it was nice to meet me. Then she made a light comment about how Clara always had people from the early days around, which was kind of charming. She laughed softly. The others laughed too. It was not cruel. It was casual. That made it worse. Clara did not correct them. She did not say father. She did not add my name with pride. She simply let the sentence hang there as a useful label, like it solved a problem. I sat in that chair and felt my chest tighten again, not with pain this time, but with something close to grief. I watched my daughter speak with her neighbors in a bright, friendly tone while I became a background detail in her life. She was not pushed into it in that moment. She chose it. When the neighbors walked away, Clara turned back to me and continued her boundary talk as if nothing happened. She said she hoped I understood. She said she wanted peace. She said we could meet sometimes, but it needed to be scheduled. She said she did not want drama. I told her I understood. That is what I said out loud. Inside, something became clear. I was not dealing with a temporary misunderstanding. I was dealing with a new identity my daughter had built for herself, and in that identity, I did not fit. My presence was a risk to her image. My history was a stain she wanted to cover with clean stories. I left the clubhouse a few minutes later. I did not argue. I did not beg. I told Clara to take care of herself. She hugged me again, quick and light, and then she walked back toward the pool area with her shoulders straight, like she had completed a task. On my drive home, I kept both hands on the wheel and stared at the road. I did not replay every word. I did not imagine clever responses. I simply accepted what I had seen. Back in my apartment, I opened the leather folder for the first time in days. I took out the old keys and set them beside the folder on the table. I did not touch them again. I also pulled out a small notebook and wrote down dates. The day at the kitchen, the day at the hospital, the day at the clubhouse. I wrote short notes beside each one, simple facts, no emotion, just what happened and who was present. Then I powered on my laptop and created a new folder with a plain name. Inside, I made subfolders by month. I started saving messages, invitations, and screenshots of public posts that mentioned the house as if it came from the King family. I did not share it with anyone. I did not post it. I just organized it. When you build houses, you learn something basic. If the foundation is wrong, you do not fix it by painting the walls. You fix it by going back to the structure. That night, I sat at my table and looked at the keys again. I realized that love does not mean letting yourself be erased. Love also does not mean forcing your way into someone's life when they have decided to shut the door. It means respecting yourself enough to stop accepting a lie. So I made a decision. Not a loud decision, not a dramatic one. A quiet, practical decision. I would stop trying to win a place in a story that was written without me. I would correct the facts through the proper channels. I would do it calmly. I would do it within the rules. And I would let the results speak for themselves. The next morning, I went to Rena's office. Her building was downtown, near the older courthouse and the newer glass towers. The lobby smelled like coffee and clean stone. People moved fast and spoke in quiet voices. I have been in many offices because of contracts, permits, and disputes. I do not enjoy them, but I respect what they represent. Paper and procedure may feel cold, but they are steady. They do not change their tone based on who is popular in a room. Rena met me in a small conference room. She wore a simple jacket and carried a thin notebook. She asked how I was feeling after the hospital visit. I told her I was fine and that I was taking care of it. She nodded once like she expected that answer. Then she asked me to explain what happened at the house and at the clubhouse. I told her everything in order. I kept it factual. I told her about the gate, the service entrance, the kitchen, and how Clara introduced me. I told her about Brandon's private talk and the way he framed my presence as a problem. I told her about the clubhouse, the neighbors, and how Clara called me an old family friend. I did not add extra emotion. I did not need to. The facts were heavy enough. Rena listened without interrupting. She wrote short notes and looked up at me at certain points as if she was checking whether I was sure. When I finished, she leaned back and said she wanted to confirm 2 things. She asked if I still had the original keys. I said yes. She asked if I still had access to my old records from the purchase and the trust setup. I said I did. Rena said the first step was to stop talking in circles with people who benefit from confusion. She said if Clara and the King family were building a public story that erased me, then I should not try to fix it with private conversations. She said that only gives them more chances to reshape my words. She said the proper way was to rely on what is formal and provable. She asked if I had ever transferred full ownership of the property directly to Clara outside the trust structure. I told her no. I told her I followed her advice years ago. I told her I did what she said would protect Clara and protect the asset. Rena nodded again, slower this time. She said that mattered. She then spoke carefully about options. She did not talk like a person looking for drama. She talked like a person checking a building plan for weak points. She said the structure I set up years ago gave me real control, but it had rules. She said we had to follow those rules exactly. She said my calm approach would help because courts and banks respond better to steady facts than to messy arguments. I asked her what I should do next. Rena said we needed to gather clean evidence of the pattern. Not rumors, not feelings, dates, messages, public statements, and anything that showed consistent misrepresentation and public denial. She said this was not about forcing a relationship. She said it was about correcting legal reality and preventing further misuse of my name and my work. I told her I did not want to hurt Clara. I told her I only wanted to stop being treated like I did not exist. Rena said she understood. She said consequences can feel harsh, but consequences are sometimes the only language people respect. She asked me to bring everything I had to her office by the end of the week. I told her I could. She also told me not to contact Brandon or Vivian directly. She said I should keep communication short and written if needed. She said I should not argue with anyone at the gate, at the house, or online. She said the less noise I made, the clearer the record would be. After that meeting, I walked back to my truck and sat for a minute before turning the key. I watched people in suits cross the street while looking at their phones. I felt strange, but also steady. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. That afternoon, I asked Isla to meet me at my apartment. When she arrived, I showed her the folder system I had started on my laptop. I told her I needed help organizing things with dates and clear labels. Isla did not ask a lot of questions. She just nodded and started making a list. She is young, but she works like a professional. She understands that details matter. We spent hours going through my messages with Clara. Some were simple and friendly. Some were polite and distant. Some were invitations that came late or were changed at the last minute. We saved them in order. We also saved screenshots of public posts that described the house as if it came from the King family. Isla did not comment much, but I saw her face tighten as she read certain lines. I also wrote down names of people who were present during key moments. The house manager who called me the new handyman, the party planner who watched Clara describe me like I was nobody, the neighbor at the clubhouse who heard Clara's introduction. I did not plan to drag these people into a fight. I only wanted the record to be complete. 2 days later, I went back to Rena's office with a small box. Inside were old copies of the purchase documents, maintenance records, emails from the builders, and the original closing papers. I did not show them to anyone else. I brought them straight to Rena. She looked through the box quietly, pulling out certain pages and placing them into a separate stack. She did not explain every detail to me. She simply said this was strong, and she said we would be careful. From Rena's office, we went to the bank. The bank building was tall and quiet. The lobby had marble floors and soft lighting. A receptionist checked our appointments and asked us to wait. A few minutes later, a trust officer led us to a private room. The trust officer spoke in a neutral tone and asked to confirm my identity. I showed my identification. He asked a few basic questions and then looked at papers in front of him. He asked Rena questions using careful words. Rena answered in the same tone. They spoke about procedures, notices, and timelines. I did not push forward with speeches. I listened. I watched the way the trust officer's eyes moved across pages. I watched the way he checked boxes and made notes. At one point, he asked me to sign something. I did. The act felt simple, but the weight behind it felt real. When we left the bank, Rena told me we had done what we needed to do for that step. She said the next step involved formal filings. She said we would do it through the proper channels and we would keep everything clean. The next morning, we went to the courthouse area. We did not go into a courtroom. We did not stand in front of a judge. We went through hallways, counters, and offices where clerks processed paper. It was not dramatic. It was ordinary, and that made it more serious. Rena carried a folder. I carried nothing in my hands. I did not want to look like I was performing anything. At one counter, a clerk reviewed the filing, asked a few questions, and then stamped pages. The sound of the stamp was sharp and final. The clerk handed Rena a receipt and said the filing was accepted. Rena folded the receipt and handed it to me. She said I should keep it safe. I slid it into my wallet behind an old photo of Clara as a child. I did not do it for sentiment. I did it because I wanted to remember why I was doing this. Not for pride, not for control, for truth. After that, we sat in a small cafe near the courthouse. Rena spoke calmly about what could happen next. She said people like Vivian and Brandon often react in one of two ways. They either pretend nothing is real until it hits them, or they try to pressure the person they think is weak. She said I should expect both. She told me again not to argue. She told me again to keep things factual and quiet. I asked her what I should do if Clara called me crying. Rena said I should be kind but clear. She said I should not let emotion rewrite the record. She said I could love my daughter and still protect myself. That night, while I was back at my apartment, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat. It was not from Clara. It was from Elaine. Elaine wrote that there would be a charity brunch at the house soon. She wrote that it would be a big moment for Clara and Brandon. She wrote that Vivian wanted the family to support them. Elaine added that it would look good if I came and kept things peaceful. I read that message slowly. They were planning a public event in the same house where Clara had introduced me like I was nobody. They were planning to stand in front of guests and tell a polished story. They were planning to do it with confidence because they still believed I would stay quiet. I did not reply to Elaine right away. Instead, I opened my laptop and checked my folders. I confirmed that everything was saved. I checked my notes. I checked the dates. I checked the names. Then I closed the laptop and sat in silence for a long time. I was not excited. I was not scared. I felt prepared. I looked at the keys on my table again. I did not touch them. I just looked at them and thought about how people treat symbols. A house can be a home, or it can be a stage. It depends on who tells the story and who controls the structure behind it. By the time I went to bed, I had one clear decision in my mind. If they wanted a public moment, I would not stop them from having one. I would simply make sure the truth was ready to meet them there. The charity brunch was scheduled for a Sunday late morning. Elaine wrote about it in the family group chat like it was a celebration that could fix everything. She said it would be a good look. She said it would show unity. She said Vivian wanted the whole family present. I read that message and set my phone down on the table. I did not reply right away because I did not trust myself to answer in a soft way. I also did not want to answer in a sharp way. I wanted my next steps to be clean, not emotional. That same day, Rena called me and asked me to come by her office again. Her voice was calm, but it carried a focus that told me she was moving pieces into place. I went downtown in the afternoon when traffic was lighter. I parked in the same garage and took the same elevator up. The routine helped. Routine is how I stay steady. In the conference room, Rena had a small stack of papers and a tablet open. She did not slide anything to me with dramatic pauses. She simply explained what we were doing next in plain terms. She said we were confirming the order of steps and making sure every notice was sent to the right place. She said mistakes are what people use to delay things. She said we would give them no mistakes. I asked her if I had to attend the brunch. Rena said I did not have to do anything. She said the law does not care about brunches. Then she paused and said, in practical words, that if Vivian planned to use that event to publicly claim credit for the house, it was a useful moment to let the truth catch up. She said it was not about embarrassing anyone. It was about ending the false story in the same room where it was being performed. I told her I understood. Rena asked if I had received any direct messages from Brandon or Vivian since the kitchen incident. I told her no. I told her everything came through assistance, through Elaine, or through Clara's careful messages. Rena nodded and said that was expected. She said people who like control often communicate through layers. It keeps their hands clean, and it keeps others uncertain. Before I left, Rena reminded me again not to argue with anyone. She told me to keep my tone calm and my words short. She said if someone tried to provoke me, I should not chase the conversation. She said I should let procedure speak. When I got back to my apartment, Isla was waiting outside in the hallway with a small folder and her laptop bag. She asked if I had eaten. I told her not much. She walked into my kitchen, opened my fridge like she lived there, and started putting together something simple. I did not stop her. For years I took care of other people. Accepting care still felt strange, but I was learning. After we ate, we sat at my table with our laptops open. Isla pulled up the folders we had created and checked the labels. She made sure the dates matched the screenshots. She made sure every file name was clear and consistent. She made a list of people present at each key moment. She did not add opinions or emotional notes. She treated it like work, because that is what it was. At one point, she asked quietly if Clara had ever been like this before. I told her Clara used to be different. I told her about the old townhouse and the nights she sat at the kitchen table doing homework while I did paperwork. I told her Clara used to be proud of where she came from. Isla listened without interrupting. Then she said something simple. She said people can love you and still choose comfort over truth. She said it happens more than we want to admit. Later that night, Clara texted me directly. She wrote that she hoped I would come to the brunch. She wrote that it would mean a lot to her. She wrote that she wanted things to feel normal again. She wrote that she did not want tension. I read her message 3 times. It sounded kind on the surface, but the word normal did not mean what it used to mean. Normal now meant scheduled access, careful introductions, and me staying quiet while others spoke over my life. Normal now meant me being small enough to fit into their picture. I replied with one sentence. I told her I would be there. I did not add anything else. The next day, Elaine called me. Her voice was soft, the way it always got when she wanted something from me without asking directly. She asked how I was feeling. She asked if I was sleeping. Then she shifted into the topic like she was stepping into a room she already owned. She told me Vivian was excited about the brunch. She said there would be donors, neighbors, and important friends. She said it was a chance for Clara to shine. She said I should not bring up old issues. She said Clara needed support, not stress. She said I should remember that Brandon had given Clara a higher life. I did not argue with Elaine. I did not raise my voice. I simply told her I understood what she wanted. I told her I would handle myself properly. Elaine sounded relieved, as if she believed that meant I would be quiet and grateful. She ended the call quickly after that, like she had checked off a task. That evening, I met Rena at a small cafe near her office. We sat at a corner table, away from other people. She spoke in a low, steady voice and confirmed that the final steps were queued. She said certain notifications had already been delivered through official channels. She said everything was timed so there would be no confusion about when things took effect. I asked her what I should bring to the brunch. Rena said I should bring nothing that could be taken from me. She said I should carry only what I needed. She said she would handle the formal side at the right time. She told me to show up calm, listen, and speak only when necessary. On my way home, I stopped at a small store and bought a new button-up shirt. Nothing expensive, just clean and simple. I also bought a plain envelope and a small notebook. I have learned that when things get emotional, people forget details. I did not want to forget anything. That night I did something I had not done in a long time. I cleaned my apartment more than usual. I wiped down every surface. I organized my desk. I lined up the items on my table, my keys, my wallet, my phone charger, the small notebook, and a simple pen. It was not because I expected visitors. It was because cleaning makes my mind quiet. It tells my body that the work is under control. In the morning, Isla came by again. She did not ask questions. She just checked if my phone was charged and if my car had fuel. She handed me a small bottle of water and told me to keep it in my jacket pocket. I nodded and thanked her. Before she left, she looked at me and said, in a steady tone, that I did not deserve to be treated like a shadow in my own story. Then she walked out before I could answer. I stood by my window for a moment and watched the street below. People moved through their day without thinking about what their family names meant, without thinking about what they owed and what they were owed. I felt calm, but the calm had a firm edge now. Not anger, just clarity. I dressed slowly. I chose my plain jacket. I checked my reflection once and then stopped looking. I did not need to look powerful. I only needed to be present. I put the original keys in my pocket, not as a threat, but as a reminder of fact. I placed the notebook in my jacket as well. Before I left, I looked at the photos on my shelf again. The small moments. Clara smiling with missing teeth. Clara holding a school certificate. Clara asleep on the couch with her head on my shoulder. Those memories were real. No one could rewrite them out of existence just because a nicer neighborhood had different rules. I drove to the gated community late enough to avoid sitting in my car outside for too long, but early enough that I would not be rushed. When I reached the security gate, the guard asked for my name. I gave it. He checked a list. This time he nodded and lifted the barrier without delay. I drove down the smooth streets and followed the turns toward the house. Cars were already parked along the curb. I could see people in bright clothes moving toward the front entrance. A catering van was parked near the side. The house looked even larger in daylight, like a display set for someone else's dream. I parked a short distance away and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. I took one slow breath and let it out. I did not rehearse speeches. I did not imagine arguments. I reminded myself of one simple rule. Stay calm, stay factual. Let the proper systems do what they are meant to do. Then I stepped out of the car, closed the door gently, and walked toward the house. I walked up the front steps with my hands relaxed at my sides. The door was open. Soft music played inside. The living room was full of people in bright clothes, holding small plates and cups. A long table near the windows had pastries laid out like a display. Near the back, staff moved in smooth lines, refilling trays and wiping surfaces before anyone noticed a spot. Clara stood near the center of the room. She wore a light dress and a practiced smile. Brandon stood a little behind her, one hand on his phone, greeting people with quick confidence. Vivian moved like she owned the air. She touched shoulders, nodded at donors, and guided conversations with small hand motions. Elaine floated nearby, smiling too much, like she was afraid of silence. When Clara saw me, her smile paused for half a second, then returned. She walked over and gave me a quick hug. She told me she was glad I came. She said she wanted a good day. I told her I understood and that I was here to support her. Brandon stepped in and shook my hand like we were co-workers. He said he appreciated me showing up. He said it meant a lot that we could keep things peaceful. Vivian joined them and greeted me with a smooth tone. She said it was nice I could make time to attend. She said the community liked seeing old connections support Clara. I did not correct her, not yet. Rena arrived 10 minutes later, alone, calm, and dressed in a simple dark outfit that fit the room without trying to compete with it. She nodded at me from across the living room and took a position near the edge, close to the hallway. She did not look like she was waiting to perform. She looked like she was there to do a job. People began to gather as Vivian stepped toward the center with a glass in her hand. Someone tapped a spoon against it. The room quieted. Vivian smiled and thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about the charity, about community values, and about generosity. She described the house as a symbol of what families could do when they invested in the right future. She praised Brandon for his leadership. She praised Clara for her grace. Then she shifted to the part I expected. Vivian said Clara had come from a rough start, but the King family had lifted her into a higher standard. She said the house was a gift that proved what real support looked like. She said it was beautiful when people left their old limitations behind. She said this home was the beginning of Clara's true life. I felt the keys in my pocket, heavy and steady. My heart did not race. My face did not heat. I simply waited until Vivian paused, smiling at the room, ready for applause. I raised my hand slightly and asked if I could say a few words. I kept my voice low and calm. The room hesitated. Vivian's smile stayed in place, but her eyes narrowed a little. She said politely that it was a busy program. She said maybe later. I nodded once. Then I said I would be brief. I said I only wanted to clarify one point, because the house was being discussed as if it came from someone else. I said I did not want anyone to be misled. A few people shifted their feet. Someone glanced at Clara. Brandon's posture tightened. Clara's face went pale around the mouth. Vivian's smile became thin. I said my name. I said I was Clara's father. I said I had built my life through construction and small development, and I purchased this property as a long-term gift for my daughter. I said I did it through a formal structure, not through a casual handover. Because I wanted it protected, I said I was not there to argue about feelings. I was there to state facts. Brandon let out a short laugh like this was a misunderstanding. He said, in a friendly tone, that I was confused. He said the house was theirs. He said paperwork had been handled a long time ago. Vivian stepped in and said we did not need to discuss private matters in public. She said it was not appropriate. She said I should sit down. I looked at Rena. I did not signal her with gestures. I simply stopped speaking and waited. Rena stepped forward and introduced herself in a clear voice as my attorney. She said she would keep it simple. She said the property had always been held under a trust arrangement created by me, and she said the trust had conditions tied to truthful representation and continued respect. She said those conditions were not met. She said the legal result was already in motion. Rena handed Vivian a sealed notice. She handed Brandon a sealed notice. She handed Clara a sealed notice. She did not throw them. She did not make a show of it. She placed them into their hands like a clerk passing documents across a counter. Vivian stared at the paper like it was dirty. Brandon opened his envelope quickly, eyes scanning the page. His smile dropped. He looked up and said this could not be real. He said it had to be a mistake. He said he would call someone. Rena said he could call anyone he wanted. She said the bank had already been notified and had acknowledged the instruction. She said the county filing had been accepted. She said a licensed trust officer was present and could confirm the effective date. She gestured slightly to a man near the hallway who had been standing quietly, unnoticed by most people until that moment. The trust officer stepped forward, nodded, and confirmed in plain terms that control of the property had shifted according to the trust's terms. He said the change was effective. He said access and authority were no longer in Clara's hands. He said further steps would follow through formal channels. The room went silent in a way I have only heard on job sites when a crane stops moving and everyone waits to see what happens next. Clara's hands started to shake. She tried to speak, but her voice did not come out at first. Then she said she did not mean it like that. She said she was under pressure. She said she was trying to keep peace. She said she never wanted to hurt me. She looked at me like she wanted me to rescue her from the moment. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse her with long sentences. I said I had tried to speak with her privately more than once. I said I had stood at her kitchen door and listened to her describe me as if I was not her father. I said I had sat in the clubhouse and watched her introduce me as an old family friend. I said she made choices in public, and those choices created consequences in public. Elaine stepped forward quickly, face tense. She said this did not need to happen. She said I was taking things too far. She said Clara was sensitive and I should think about her future. She said we could talk later, quietly, as a family. Rena answered Elaine, not me. She said this was not a family argument. She said it was a legal correction. She said the documents were clear, the procedure was followed, and the outcome was already in effect. She said if anyone wanted to contest it, they could do so through the proper process. But the house was no longer a stage for false credit. Vivian tried to recover control of the room. She told guests this was a misunderstanding and the event would continue. She told staff to keep serving. She told people to give Clara space. But the room had shifted. People were no longer listening to Vivian's tone. They were watching faces. They were checking phones. A few guests stepped back and whispered to each other. I saw one woman glance at Clara with a new kind of caution, like she was realizing she had been told a polished story that did not match reality. Brandon moved closer to me, voice tight, trying to keep it low. He said I was embarrassing Clara. He said I was making a scene. He said I would regret this. His words were sharp, but he was careful not to sound wild in front of witnesses. I looked at him and told him I understood he was upset. I told him I was not here to trade insults. I told him I was here to end confusion. I said if he wanted to speak, he could speak to my attorney. Rena lifted her hand slightly, and Brandon stopped talking to me and turned toward her. He asked questions quickly. He said he needed time. He said they had guests. He said this was not fair. Rena replied with the same calm tone. She said fairness was not a feeling. She said fairness was following agreements. And the agreement had been broken. Then something small happened that made everything final for me. Clara reached into her purse and pulled out a set of keys. She held them like they could save her. She looked at me and said she could fix this. She said she could tell everyone the truth. She said she could make it right. She said she just needed time. I took the original keys from my pocket. The older set. The set I kept since the day the house was secured. I did not wave them. I did not hold them up like a trophy. I walked to the kitchen counter, placed them down gently on the marble, and slid them a few inches toward her. I told Clara that time was what I had given her for years. I told her that respect was what she refused to give me in public. I told her that I was done asking for a place in my own story. I turned to Rena and asked if we were finished. She nodded once. She told me everything needed had been delivered. I walked toward the front door while the room stayed frozen behind me. I did not look back to check who was crying or who was arguing. I did not wait for apologies that would only come because the room demanded them. I stepped outside into the bright air and felt my shoulders loosen for the first time in months. As I reached the driveway, I heard the security gate motor in the distance. The sound was steady and mechanical, like a system doing what it was built to do. I got into my car, closed the door, and drove away while the house behind me remained full of people who had just learned the truth the hard way.